Rain clawed at the windows like fingers of the past, refusing to let go. Detective Harold Merton, now 69 and long retired, sat in his leather chair by the fireplace, nursing the final inches of a bottle of Glenlivet. The flames flicker reflected in his tired eyes, and the newspaper at his feet bore headlines that had long stopped exciting him. The world had moved on. It had been years since anyone called him detective, years since anyone dared. The scars of his first case still lingered not on his body but inside. Like a whisper that never truly fades, the case of Lillian Graves, the 17-year-old girl found murdered near Hollow Creek in 1986. Closed, buried, done. Or so he thought. That night, something unexpected arrived, a single envelope, slid beneath the door. No stamp, no name, just one sentence typed on a yellowing sheet of paper. Lillian Graves is not dead. You buried the wrong girl. Harold's breath caught like a fishhook in his throat. He stood, bones creaking in protest, and examined the paper under the desk lamp. Old-fashioned typewriter font. No fingerprints, no watermark, nothing. Impossible. Lillian had been identified. Dental records. Blood on the scene. The confession of a man who later died in prison. But even back then, something had never quite added up. No murder weapon found, no clear motive, and a witness statement that was lost hours after it was filed. He poured himself another drink, but it couldn't drown out the scream from decades ago. Lillian's mother, shrieking in the courtroom. When the verdict came down, "You've got the wrong man." The next morning, Harold stood outside the now-abandoned Hollow Creek Hospital, the same place where Lillian had interned as a volunteer just days before her murder. Inside, the walls were a peeling canvas of rot and mildew. The place had been shut down for asbestos violations years ago, but for Harold, it was like stepping into the lungs of his own memory. And then he heard it. A click. Photo camera. He turned, gun drawn out of habit, even though he hadn't held a badge in over 20 years. But there was no one, just a single Polaroid pinned to a corkboard. Photo of Lillian, or someone who looked like her. But this photo was dated 2 years ago. His heart hammered. He took the photo, no fingerprints again, but something caught his eye. An indistinct figure in the background, blurry, shadowed. Was it the same man from the trial, or someone else entirely? Harold needed help, and he knew exactly where to go. Miles away, nestled inside a fortress of computer monitors and cigarette smoke, sat Clara Quinn, a cyber forensics consultant and Harold's only protege, someone who both idolized and distrusted him in equal measure. "Harold," she said, eyes narrowed, "you're opening a box that everyone agreed to bury a long time ago." He slid the photo toward her. "Then help me find who put the lock on it." Clara analyzed the Polaroid. There's something embedded in the image. QR codes aren't usually visible to the naked eye, but old surveillance systems sometimes use them to mark chain of custody. She enhanced the image, and a code emerged. Seconds later, a GPS location popped onto her screen. A graveyard, but not Lillian's. It was unmarked headstone in a forgotten cemetery behind St. Malachi's Chapel. The stone was cracked as if struck with deliberate intent. Beneath it, Harold and Clara found something chilling. A metal box, sealed with wax. Or inside, a lock of red hair. A hospital badge with Lillian's name dated 2 days after her supposed death. In a cassette tape. They rushed back to Clara's studio to play it. The voice was unmistakable. "Lillian's, don't have much time. If you're hearing this, I need you to know, everything they told you was a lie. Hollow Creek wasn't a hospital. It was a cover for them." Harold froze. "Yeah?" The tape clicked off suddenly, mid-sentence. Clara leaned forward. "Who is them, Harold?" He turned to the window and saw a black van parked across the street. The next day, Clara's studio was broken into. Nothing was stolen except the tape. Not your photo, not the box, just the tape. But whoever did it left a note behind, scrawled in blood, red ink on Clara's mirror. "Stop digging or join her." Harold burned the note, but not before scanning it. The handwriting matched that of a serial killer from 1991, the Night Paragon. A man who was presumed dead after jumping from the Vincent Bridge. A man who was rumored to have worked at Hollow Creek in the 80s. Harold returned home that night to find every piece of case evidence from the Lillian Graves files sitting on his porch in a sealed cardboard box. But there was something else inside. Another tape, an unlabeled. He pressed play. A voice, male, calm. Detective Merton. You're not going to like what you find next, but you must look in the lake. The answer is under the water. Truth doesn't float, it sinks. He knew which lake they meant, Chapel Lake, just half a mile from where Lillian's body had been found. That night, he stood on the edge of its cold, black waters with a flashlight and a pole. After an hour of probing, something clicked against the metal tip. He dropped to his knees, reaching into the mud. A box, chained, rusted. Inside was a journal, and it wasn't Lillian's. It belonged to someone named E.M. Clara met him back at the house. Harold nodded. Evelyn Merton, my wife. But she died in 1985, didn't she? He opened the journal and showed Clara the first entry, dated July 16th, 1986, a full month after her supposed death. They're making me say I'm dead, but I'm not. And I know who Lillian really is. The journal trembled in Harold's hands, not from the cold, but from what the words inside threatened to unravel. They're making me say I'm dead, but I'm not. And I know who Lillian really is. Harold stared at the name on the leather-bound cover again. E.M., his late wife, dead and buried, supposedly from a car crash a year before the Lillian Graves case even began. Why was her handwriting in this book? And why did she sound terrified? Clara scrolled through digital archives, face lit by the pale blue glow of the monitor. Harold, your wife's death certificate was signed by a doctor from Hollow Creek. Harold's voice dropped. She never worked there. She was a librarian. Clara tapped a few keys. Not according to this. Evelyn Merton was listed as administrative staff on a confidential medical research project, one tied to a company called Iden Pharmaceuticals. He hadn't heard that name in decades. Aiden had funded Hollow Creek's renovations in 1984, only to disappear quietly the following year. Their research was rumored to involve memory suppression, experimental psychotropics, and classified behavior modification techniques. Conspiracy theories had swirled, but nothing was ever proven. And so now, inside Evelyn's journal, a name appeared repeatedly. Project Narrow Glass. Memories aren't lost. Sometimes they're taken. Harold flipped through the brittle pages. Notes, drawings, maps of underground chambers beneath Hollow Creek, and one section detailing a subject, Lillian Graves. The entry dated July 20, 1986 read, They call her Subject Echo, but her real name is Lillian. The experiments are escalating. Her memories are breaking. If I don't get her out soon, she won't remember who she is. Clara gasped. They didn't just fake Lillian's death. They wiped her memory. His Harold's throat tightened. Maybe reprogrammed her. But then came the biggest shock yet. A photo tucked between the journal pages. It was Evelyn standing next to Lillian. So the photo was marked, taken in 1992, 6 years after both were presumed dead. They had to move fast. Harold and Clara returned to the Hollow Creek ruins at midnight, guided by a crudely drawn map from Evelyn's journal. Beneath the building's east wing, behind a wall of collapsed brick, they found a metal hatch partially buried under decades of dust. Clara pried it open. A ladder descended into darkness. The air below smelled like mildew, chemicals, and something worse. Fear fossilized in silence. They descended into an abandoned sublevel, rooms lined with empty hospital beds, ivy hooks, and one-way mirrors. In one chamber, rusted lockers bore names Harold recognized. One read Graves L, another read Merton E. But the third locker was newer. It bore the label Sparrow. Harold whispered, What the hell is Sparrow? Suddenly, a sound echoed behind them. A voice, raspy, female, and barely human. "I remember you." They spun around. A woman stood at the end of the hall, hair wild, body frail, eyes glassy. But there was something familiar in her face. Clara gasped. "Lillian?" The woman stepped into the light and smiled. "Now, I was Lillian. Now, what they made me." Harold approached slowly. "Where is Evelyn, my wife? Is she alive?" The woman's smile faded. "Evelyn tried to save us. She found out too much. They took her. They changed her, too." Clara stepped forward. "What is Project Narrowglass?" The woman blinked rapidly, as if fragments of memory were short-circuiting. "Narrowglass is a lie. It's not about healing. It's about replacing. They found a way to erase identities and plant new ones. We weren't patients. We were prototypes." She pointed toward a dark corridor. "They're still running it, just not here." And then she collapsed. They rushed to her side. Heartbeat erratic, breathing shallow. Clara checked her pulse. "She's been drugged. Recently. Someone's been keeping her alive and hidden." Harold looked around. "We have to get her out." But before they could lift her, alarms blared, high-pitched and mechanical. The old lab was still active. The truth doesn't want to be found. It fights back. Emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the hallways in crimson pulses. Security doors slammed shut behind them, trapping them in the lower wing. Clara cursed. "We need another exit." Lillian, if it was still her, murmured something under her breath. "Boathouse. Tunnel." They carried her down a different hallway, following the journal's map toward a hidden utility passage. The red lights painted shadows across the walls like bleeding ghosts. In a supply closet behind a false panel, they found a ladder leading to a drainage tunnel, but something else was waiting. Had a second envelope. Harold opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, a photo of Evelyn. Not from the ADS, from last year. Walking into a building labeled St. Aurelius Institute for Neurocognitive Research in Boston. Harold clinched the photo. She was alive, and someone wanted him to find her. They escaped through the tunnel into the woods with Lillian unconscious in Clara's arms. Harold stared at the photo again. "Clara, she's not just alive. She's waiting for me." Clara nodded, breathless. "Then we go to Boston." But as they reached the edge of the trees, a black van pulled into view. The same van from days before. Its doors slid open, and inside sat a man in a gray suit, face obscured by shadows. He spoke one sentence. "Detective Merton, I think you've earned some answers." The man in the gray suit didn't move. He simply waited, his presence calm, almost surgical. The engine of the black van purred behind him, and for the first time in decades, Harold Merton hesitated. Not from fear, but because a part of him already knew that this man had been watching him for years. Harold stepped forward, hand subtly on the grip of his revolver. "You said I've earned some answers. Start talking." As the man nodded toward the van. "Not here. Eyes are everywhere. You've gotten too close and too loud." Inside the van, Clara cradled Lillian, her pulse steady now, her eyes fluttering behind closed lids. The gray-suited man sat across from Harold and Clara, his voice low, steady, like a metronome made of secrets. "My name is Dr. Ezra Volin. I used to work at Hollow Creek before it was shut down, before the government turned it into a testing ground." Harold cut in. "For Project Narrowglass." Volin's eyebrow twitched. "That's the name you've heard. But Narrowglass was just a shell program. The real project was called Nemazine Protocol. The goal wasn't to erase memories. It was to replace them with engineered identities." He reached into a case and pulled out 2 files, both stamped with red ink, Subject E and Subject L. Clara opened Le's file. "Photos Charts, MRI scans, reports of behavior modification, personality shifts, dream encoding. She was never dead, Volan said. Lillian was never allowed to be who she was. And your wife, Evelyn, was one of the first whistleblowers. She got too close, tried to smuggle out evidence. Harold whispered. So you made her disappear? Volan shook his head. They did. I've been trying to undo it ever since. Woolen handed Clara a drive. On here is surveillance footage from the St. Aurelius Institute. Look closely. You'll see Evelyn, but you'll also see others. Harold connected the drive to Clara's tablet. The footage showed a rehabilitation wing, patients wandering with dazed expressions. And there, unmistakably, was Evelyn Merton. But her name tag read Dr. Celeste Warren. Clara gasped. They didn't kill her, they turned her. Volan nodded. Nemesine's final phase. Implanting fabricated identities in high-perfectioning adults. The Institute is the next evolution of what started in Hollow Creek. Evelyn's not just a patient, she's one of their senior researchers now. Harold felt his entire body chill. So she doesn't even remember who she is? Worse, Volan said. She believes she's someone else. Completely. And if you try to trigger her memory without preparation, the psychological backlash could destroy her. Suddenly a loud ping erupted from Clara's laptop. The GPS beacon in the drive had been activated. Volan paled. They found us. The past is a ghost, but the present is a predator. The van was ambushed 30 minutes later. 2 black SUVs intercepted them on a remote bridge. Tires squealed, doors flew open. Men in tactical gear poured out, masked and silent. Move, Harold yelled. Clara and Volant dragged Lillian out the back and sprinted toward the woods. Harold fired warning shots, buying them seconds. As he turned to follow, a single dart struck his neck. His vision blurred. Darkness swallowed everything. He awoke in a concrete room. No windows, one light bulb swaying overhead. Shackled. Across from him, a figure stepped into view. An older man, familiar. Detective Merton, he said, voice oily with authority. You never were good at letting things go. Harold squinted. I know you. You're Senator Aldous Hargrave, the man interrupted. Retired now, but once upon a time, I approved funding for Nemesine. He circled Harold like a wolf around an old adversary. You're wondering why we didn't kill you, why we let you stir the hornet's nest? It's because we needed you to. The system requires a leak now and then. Keeps the public entertained, distracted. Harold spat blood. You turn human minds into blank slates. No, Hargrave smiled. We gave broken people new lives. Isn't that what everyone wants? Hargrave dropped something in Harold's lap. Another envelope. Harold opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a recent photo of Clara, tied to a chair, mouth taped, eyes wide in terror. Hargrave leaned close. You have one more chance to play ball detective. Help us retrieve the girl, Lillian, or we finish what started in '86. Harold's jaw clenched. You'll never touch her. Hargrave smiled, then say goodbye to your protege. He stood and walked out. The door slammed shut. Hours passed. Or days? Harold didn't know. Until one night, a scraping sound echoed from the far wall. A small square of concrete slid away, revealing a face. Millions. Eyes sharp, alert. No time, she whispered. I remember now. I remember everything. And they've taken Clara. Harold's voice cracked. Where? She pulled a bloody key from her sleeve. To Boston. To the Institute. That's where it ends. They escaped through the tunnel Lillian had carved over days, climbing through rusted pipes and maintenance quarters until they reached open air. A storm raged overhead. Harold looked at her, breathless. Are you really Lillian Graves? He looked back, smile faint and fierce. I was. Now I'm the one who's gonna burn it all down. The storm beat down on Boston like a reckoning. Harold and Lillian stood atop the parking garage opposite St. Aurelius Institute, rain slicing through the dark like 1,000 silent alarms. The glowing windows across the street pulsed like a nervous heartbeat. Clara was in there, so was Evelyn, and so were the men who turned memories into weapons. Harold checked his revolver. Lillian clicked open a case of vials. Clear, glowing fluid swirled inside. "What is that?" he asked. Lillian didn't flinch. The antidote to everything. They moved through the back entrance, using staff ID badges Volan had smuggled to them. Inside, the sterile halls buzzed with fluorescent light and hushed whispers. It looked like a hospital, but the tension in the air reeked of surveillance and sedation. Lillian led with unnerving precision. "You remember all of this?" Harold asked. She gave a grim nod. "Every hallway, every room, every scream, and where they keep the archives." They reached a restricted wing. A retinal scanner guarded the door. Lillian stepped up. As a green beam traced her eye, "Access granted." Harold blinked. "How did you—" "I was part of the system," she said. "They never revoked my clearance." Inside, they found a room lined with server racks, hard drives, and something stranger, brain maps. Neurological blueprints hung on the walls, labeled with code names. "Project Sparrow," Harold read aloud. "Subject, C. M." His blood froze. Clara Merton. They don't just erase people, they build them from blueprints, identities grown like cancer cells. A cry came from the next room. They rushed in. Clara, gagged, wrists bound, was strapped to a gurney, electrodes taped to her temples. A machine nearby beeped, primed to begin memory imprinting. Harold tore off the wires and freed her. She gasped. They were going to overwrite me with Lillian's failed copy. Lillian gritted her teeth. That's what Project Sparrow was, a backup plan. If I didn't stabilize, they'd replicate me, using other minds. Clara was the next host. Clara stood, dizzy but fierce. "We end this. Tonight." But a calm voice spoke over the intercom. "You've made it farther than expected." Harold spun. Senator Aldous Hargrave's face appeared on every monitor in the lab. "But you were never meant to survive this, detective. Just trigger it." Lillian's eyes widened. "He used you to bring it all back online." Gas hissed through vents. Harold grabbed a mask from the wall and tossed another to Clara, but Lillian didn't reach for hers. She stood still, eyes fluttering, breath slowing. "No," Harold whispered, "not now." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They put a failsafe in me if I ever tried to return." Her knees buckled. Harold caught her. "Lillian, stay with me." She pressed the antidote case into his hand. "Give this to Evelyn. It will trigger her real memories, but only if she sees you. She has to know she's loved. Otherwise, it breaks her." Then her head dropped. She was breathing, but barely. They carried her to the elevator, fighting back waves of sedation in the gas-filled corridors. As they rose to the top floor, Clara turned to Harold. She knew she wouldn't make it. Harold nodded. "But she gave us a key." The elevator doors opened into a pristine office suite. A woman stood at the far end, blonde hair pulled back, lab coat spotless, eyes cold with calculated brilliance. Evan, or rather, Dr. Celeste Warren. She stared at Harold, no recognition in her eyes. "You've come to return the fugitive," she said coolly, "and your accomplice." Harold stepped forward, shaking. "I'm not here for the past, I'm here for you." He held out the photo of their wedding day. "I held your hand under the falling leaves. October 10th, 1967. Your veil was too big. You tripped walking down the aisle." Her hand trembled. "And you laughed so hard you cried. You made me promise that I'd always find you." A tear rolled down her cheek. She blinked. The confusion broke. "Harold?" He stepped forward. "Let the commands come up." She staggered. He injected the antidote into her wrist. The moment stretched like hell breath. Then she collapsed, convulsed, screamed. and remembered. An hour later, the building was in flames. Allen's emergency broadcast exposed the truth. Project Nemazine, the false deaths, the memory manipulation, Lillian's journal, Clara's near conversion, Evelyn's awakening. It all played out across news channels, all great vintage. His mansion found abandoned, and somewhere in the ashes of St. Aurelius, the servers melted, erasing everything, or almost everything. Weeks passed. Evelyn sat on the porch of their old home, sipping tea in silence. She remembered most things now, but the nightmares came in waves. Harold sat beside her, hand gently over hers. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He looked at the sunset. "No, because I finally kept my promise." Clara returned to her small apartment, unable to sleep. She kept Lillian's file beside her bed. Inside, a note. "You carry my unfinished life. Don't waste it." Somewhere far from the city, in a cabin deep in the woods, a woman watched news footage of the fire, her face scarred, her eyes unreadable. She turned off the screen and whispered, "Amazon wasn't the only project. Some truths live in the light, but the darkest ones sleep just beneath it."